I'm back with former Director of National Intelligence, Rick Grenell. Rick, let's talk a little bit about the kind of wider orbit of American foreign policy. In the aftermath of this Afghan disaster, I see that North Korea is kind of firing up its nuclear reactor a little bit. We see that China is making more aggressive statements. They got into a little bit of a skirmish with the U.S. Navy. I don't know if you saw talking about, you want to send ships over to the South China Sea. We're going to be sending ships over to the Caribbean. How would you like that? Iran obviously is feeling emboldened. So some people have called the Biden policy not America first, but America last. And the question I want to ask you is, do you think that this is driven by just a fact that Democrats tend to be weak-kneed in the Jimmy Carter mode? Or do you think that there is a sort of ideology of unwinding American power in the world? And in a sense, weakness is a matter not of temperament, but of policy?
I'm going to jump to an assumption that people who watch the Dinesh D'Souza podcasts are intellectual and smart. And so I'm going to encourage everybody to go to Carnegie Mellon's political website, where I wrote a very long piece on this exact question. In summary, I'll say this, Dinesh. I think that the opposite of America first is consensus. Joe Biden loves consensus. He loves to be accepted by global leaders. He believes in the UN and the UN Security Council, 15 members issuing a statement. And what that really means, if you want to push this to the edge, consensus means that 14 other countries at the UN Security Council or big power brokers in the Middle East or in Europe get to veto our policy and what's best for us. What Donald Trump tried to do with America First is articulate why America First was good for the rest of the world. Why, when you have the superpower thinking about what's good for itself, it means that all of these other agreements that we have, like NATO and other treaties, get implemented. And so what we have to do as diplomats is articulate America First in a better way to show that the rule of law, capitalism, all of those great things that come from America are good for other countries. And I think that what Joe Biden does is allow other countries to get to the lowest common denominator of the policy.
I mean, isn't it true, Rick, that every other country puts its own national interest first? I mean, if I think of the Chinese so-called transactional model in dealing with Africa, Asia, and so on, the Chinese go in and say, listen, we want something out of you. It could be minerals. It could be we want to build a railroad running right through Afghanistan all the way to Pakistan. So that's what's in it for us. But what's in it for you is you're going to get a railroad and you're going to get some development and we're going to put money in your country. So the Chinese are, it seems, very explicit in declaring that they've got something in their own interest that will also be in other people's interest. Isn't America First nothing more than an application of that universal principle?
100%. I spent 8 years at the UN, and I can tell you, out of 193 countries at the UN, there's only one country that gets in trouble when they put themselves first, and that's America. This idea of putting America first by Americans is not controversial around the world. Everyone assumes, of course, you have to do that. No one in another country is criticizing America first. They say, of course, you should be doing this. But they love it when Joe Biden doesn't do it because it gives them the power. Chancellor Merkel, she loves to have a weaker U.S. president that will give her the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. She wants to have a situation where she gets to influence the policy, because you know what she's doing when she influences the policy? She's putting Germany first.
That's a great point. I remember years ago, I was speaking to some diplomats in India. This was in the Bush years. And I was echoing George Bush's idea that, America and India are the world's largest democracies. And I noticed the diplomats were kind of talking among themselves, they were virtually uninterested. And then I changed gears and I said to them, hey, listen, China is the big boy in this neighborhood. China would love to, if not be a world superpower, at least dominate Japan, South Korea, and India. And so isn't it helpful for a country like India to have powerful friends outside the neighborhood that can help us check the growing power of China? And suddenly I noticed these guys, I got their immediate attention. Why? Because they understood the language of power politics, whereas the bloviating language of the common democracies to them meant nothing at all.
It's such a great point, and I saw it play out at the UN, that countries are going to act for themselves first, and when you can articulate why it's good for their country, and by the way, capitalism, the rule of law, respect for human rights, all of that, of course, is accepted. Even in countries that don't do that, they want to strive to that. They want to pretend like they're going towards that. It takes a really powerful voice, and I would argue like a Donald Trump voice, that is going to unabashedly just say, I'm going to put America first, and here's why. Don't forget that when you put America first and you demand that others pay their fair share at NATO, you're strengthening NATO. You're not undercutting NATO, as the Europeans would say. You're actually making it more useful.
I mean, now it seems I have such a sinking feeling when I see a Jake Sullivan or a Blinken, because they seem to say things like, we're very concerned about the girls in Afghanistan and the fact that they may not get the same rights that they had before. We're going to be working on trying to get a statement signed by 35 countries calling on the Taliban to be more inclusive. And I'm thinking to myself, am I living in a different world than you are? Do you really think that this is the way to get that done? Do you think that they believe it, or do you think that they just believe that this is a formulaic way to proceed, recognizing that it's essentially meaningless? It's nothing more than a kind of strongly worded op-ed coming out of a group of countries.
Look, we see it as a poor way to actually get something accomplished. But I go back to the idea of consensus. If you believe that consensus is going to make the world better, and you see how many times Blinken or Jake Sullivan or Joe Biden use the term international community, right? Joe Biden loves this phrase. He's constantly, it just means his friends who are world leaders, and he wants them to like him. So diplomacy to them is meetings where we throw around a piece of paper and we come up with the language. We fight about a verb or something. We come up with a language that we all get to sign off on, and it's the statement from the international community. They actually believe that consensus, that unity, will get something done. Now, those of us who have worked at the UN for 8 years and who know what's happening, everybody is fighting for themselves in that statement. They're not looking at the altruistic world. Every single move that a country makes to sign off on that statement is putting themselves first. Maybe it's about jobs, maybe it's about a conference that they're going to get later on. But this is the work of diplomacy. I think that we diplomats have to recognize that meetings and statements are tactics. They're not the solution. And we have to hold ourselves to account and benchmark. Are we making progress? Did the statement work? Did the meeting work? If it didn't, let's try something different.
Absolutely right. Rick, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. What a window into the mind of a diplomat, and I hope you'll come back so we can have this discussion and more some other time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dinesh.